Hello? All right.
Okay, we're going to get started with our next talk, which is Maximizing Bro Detection with John Althouse.
All right, we're going to talk about Bro. My name is John Althouse. So what is Bro? If you've never heard of Bro, you're probably thinking the same thing that I thought of when I first heard about Bro, and it's not this guy, and it's not what everyone thinks when I'm like I need to deploy Bro, and they're like, okay, is it going in production? All right. But so Bro was created in it was created 20 years ago, so it's pretty old. And the idea around the name was more of a 1984 George Orwellian nod. But I like to think of it more as like an electronic, all-seeing eye, with some binary there and the eyeball. All right, so what is Bro? Bro is a network monitoring, scripting, and logging framework. It's open source, and it lives somewhere between network intrusion detection systems and full packet capture. So it's not capturing every packet, but it's capturing all the data, the metadata for each packet, and the sessions. But it's not only based off of rules either, like a normal network intrusion detection system is. It's session and packet aware. So unlike, I guess, your traditional NIDs like Snort or something like that, it's not just looking at each packet and then moving on. It can look at the entire session. So it can say, let's say you have a SSH session. It knows that you have an SSH session. It's logging that. It's logging how long the session was as far as time goes, how many bytes were sent, how many were received. So it can look at the whole session, or it can just look at each individual packet. And what really makes Bro shine is its extremely versatile scripting language. So we're just going to do a quick kill chain real fast. So on your penetration test or your exploitation of a company, start off with the recon. How are you going to detect the recon? You can use network security monitoring, which is where Bro is, to log it. Full packet capture is always great. Network intrusion detection systems, only if you have signatures for whatever type of recon they're doing against the edge of your network. But honestly, you don't really want alerts for recon at the edge of your network, because the internet's a dirty place and that happens all day. Or cloud monitoring, like pastebin. So for the exploitation side of things, again, network security monitoring, full PCAP is great. NIDs only if there's a signature. And this is when your host intrusion detection systems really come into play. Your endpoint is great for the exploitation phase. And then under command and control, everything again, NIDs only if there's a signature, but your host intrusion detection system, your endpoint agent, is not really useful, or you cannot rely on it as your primary source of truth after the exploitation phase. And the reason for, like a good example, I was doing an evaluation of an endpoint protection product, and I exploited the system, and then the product was just running. Like the process name was the name of the product. So of course I just migrated my Meterper session into that process, and now I'm doing everything as the endpoint agent. A funny thing happened when I did that was it would tell the endpoint manager that it was still alive, but it stopped logging and it stopped accepting commands. So just an example, I wouldn't rely, at least right now, with most products, maybe not all of them. There could be some really good cases that I just don't know about. But in general, I wouldn't rely on them as a single source of truth after exploitation phase. And then actions, network security monitoring, full PCAP again. So that's why network security monitoring is, it's valid and important still. So Bro takes the traffic, logs it. You can then action or alert on it. It can do things like it can capture every file. So every file that's going across the network and clear text, it can capture it and create a local copy of it. Then with that file, you could like put it into your explode it so that you can do some analysis on every file if you want to. It can find long sessions. So again, because it's session aware, and maybe you're interested in really long running SSH sessions, Bro is great for and these are just examples of things that it can do, like alert on large outbound file transfers. That's pretty useful. Complex scripts. A good example of a complex script. So let's say you can only deploy Bro on the edge of your network, right? And you have a domain controller inside that network, and you have all this intel of evil domains, right? So if someone does a DNS lookup on one of those evil domains that you know of, they're going to do a DNS lookup against their local domain controller, which is then going to do the lookup outside to the internet. So whatever's sitting at the edge, that would just be like, okay, well, your domain controller is infected. An example script that Barola came out with, and that's out there on the internet, it's existing, and anyone can get it. What that script does is it sees that DNS request for that known malicious domain. It then waits and grabs the A record IP in the response, the DNS response, and then it waits to see what IP connects to that IP in the A record response. And then it will alert saying this is the true source of the infection. Things like that. So you can get real complex with it. Bro's great with that. So your first look at the Bro logs. It's a lot of logs. Probably can't read all those, so let me name a couple out. Communication logs, DHCP, DNS, file logs, FTP, HTTP, certs, IRC, tunnels. There's a lot of logs, and that's just to name a few. SMB, and you can create your own. You can also a good place to try out Bro scripts if you've never done Bro scripting is try.bro.org. And just to show you, here's try.bro.org. You can put in your script and then run it against some example PCAPs, or maybe upload your own PCAP. But to give you an example of what some of the Bro logs look like, let's say SSL log here. You got your source IP, port, responding IP import, TLS versions, server names, subjects, issuers, and this is for every single connection can create multiple log lines. For example, in the files.log, it's hashing every single file that it sees going across the network. So let's say, here we got SSL sessions. So this is probably a certificate that it's hashing. And then over here you got MD5 hash, SHA-1 hash. Every single file that is transferred on the network, Bro will hash it for you. And MD5, SHA-1, SHA-256, or you can add your own. Let's go back to, all right, Bro Intel framework. This is awesome. This is a part where Bro really shines above your traditional network intrusion detection systems. So let's say, let's take Snort again as an example. Traditional Snort. If you were given 10,000 evil domains, what you would do with Snort is you would then make 10,000 signatures, Snort signatures, and that's a little ridiculous, and it doesn't really make sense in a lot of environments. What the Bro Intel framework is it looks literally like this. It's just a list of intel. For example, here's a domain, so you'll just put your evil domain, and then say the indicator type is Intel domain, and then you have some details of like where that intel came from, whatnot. IP addresses, file hashes, file names, certificate serials, and so it's really easy to just add intel to Bro very quickly on the fly. So you might be thinking, okay, great, yeah, NSM, network security monitoring. But aren't most like sophisticated attacks, aren't they over SSL? What can you monitor on the edge? If it's encrypted. So let's do that. All right, so SSL certs. Remember that threat actors are human. And so they're generally lazy, and they'll take the shortest path first. And they have pride in their work. I mean, we all do. We're all humans, right? This is what your threat actor looks like. And threat actors generally use, when it comes to SSL, when they're doing an exploit over SSL, or they're using SSL for their command and control channel, they'll generally use either the same cert all the time, unlikely, but or the same cert generation tool or algorithm, especially if they wrote that tool or algorithm. Or they'll have some pool of certs that they've created that they think look really good, and they'll just use that pool of certs that they've generated. Either way, all of this is good intel to share because we can detect on all of that. So adding some of these SSL parts to the Bro Intel framework, some things that could be useful, you could add the cert subjects to the Bro Intel framework. Maybe your threat actor is always using the same subject or the same style subject. Issuers, the cert serials, valid before and after dates. Let's say your threat actor created all of his certs all on the same day. That would be pretty good. And then ciphers could be useful for, let's say you just want to find out if you have weak ciphers running at any point of your network. You could add that to the Intel framework. And then, of course, the SSL cert hash is already being hashed by Intel file hash, so you can already detect, without making any modifications, all cert hashes. And then adding something to the Bro Intel framework is really easy. This is literally it, and you could just take this script and replace a piece of it with something else, and you can then detect on that. For this one, this is cert serials, so you would just replace cert serials with like cert subject, and then that's how you would add cert subjects to the Bro Intel framework. So, for an example, Metasploit SSL certs. Metasploit by default, whenever you do something over Metasploit and you're asking for it to go over SSL, it will automatically generate a brand new cert every time you do it. This is great, so it's never the same cert twice. So that would be really hard to add to your Intel list. So let's detect that. So what does the Metasploit randomly generated cert look like in Bro? So the certificate issuer here, it might be hard to see. The CN equals hrzvox.gov. That's probably not a government domain. You got the O field with a lot of random text. The L field, that's supposed to be your city. That doesn't look like a city. The state is Wisconsin, and the country code is US. So how does Metasploit come up with these randomly generated certs? Well, if you look at the code, country code is always going to be US. The state is some random states. Looks like the location, the city field is random alpha 10 to 30 characters. Same with the O field, and the CN field is a random host name. So the random host name is just some random text with comnet or gov biz edu at the end of it. The state is all 50 states. The random text alpha is just saying uppercase characters and lowercase characters. And that's your pool for random mixed text alpha. So how can we use this to detect? So the country code is always US. That's good. That's going to make it easy to narrow down. The state is all 50 states, so that's not a good indicator. But the location field and the O field is random text alpha, 10 to 30 characters, and that's interesting because that's not what cities look like. City names. All right, so again, this is what the cert looks like. Obviously, you look at it with your naked eye, you know this is not a legit cert. So how do we detect on that random mixed text alpha for city names? And I ran through, I made a bunch of certs, and this is what the fields look like, random length and whatnot. So I was like, all right, let me create a regex for this. And so I wrote this really long regex, like complicated thing, and then I finally had an epiphany, and I just did this, and it works great. What this is just It's a lowercase character followed by 2 uppercase characters. And remember, the location field, that's the city. What U.S. cities start with a lowercase character and end with 2 uppercase characters or more? And the only thing that I could think of was Washington, D.C., if you don't do a space. So I thought this was going to false positive all over the place, and it didn't. After you filter out, I think we had like 5 false positives, and about a 40,000 unknown environment, we were getting about 1 false positive every 2 weeks to a month. That's pretty good. And the code looks like this. Is really hard for you guys to see, but I'm releasing all this code later, so you can check it out then. And then the alert's going to look like this, where we have the source IP, responding IP, the message. I'm saying, Metasploit SSL, there's a random issuer, US city, and it's pretty obvious when you look at the cert details there. All right, so I talked about this at Nova Hackers, which is a small local hacker group in Virginia, in October of 2014. Thought it was pretty cool. I was just sharing it with my buddies in my local hackerspace. It's run by Mubix. So then in November of 2014, HD Moore goes ahead and makes a change to how Metasploit was randomly generated HTTPS certs. So, all right, HD, let's go for round 2. All right. So what HD did is he made a change that emulates the auto-generated snake oil cert from Ubuntu 14.04. And then he made some updates. So they're going with 2048-bit RSA, SHA-256. So he's trying to make his SSL sessions with Metasploit a little bit more secure. So that's nice. So this is what the new code looks like. And what he's doing here is he's specifying a year, and then he's saying the valid from or valid not before and valid not after part of the certificate, the times. He's saying that it's between now and 3 years ago, randomized somewhere between there, and then it's valid until up to 10 years from that point. So that's actually really good. I was going to use that for detection, but he already made that change, so he kind of beat me to it. I was expecting him to iterate, and I was going to, but it didn't. And then he's making it so he got rid of all the other things where it was US, the random city name and all that, and he just went with very simple. The subject and issuer is just a CN field, and it's some random text. How are we going to detect that? This is what the cert looks like, an example, and it's just really small and simple. So there's really not much I can do. But again, he was trying to mimic the snake oil cert, and so let's compare those two. So they both contain only the CN field in their certs. They're both 2048-bit keys. The issuer and subject are the same. They're both valid for 10 years. Snake oil certs are valid for 10 years starting as soon as you create it, whereas the Metasploits are randomized. Again, very good. But here's where they differ. Snake oil certs they're usually SHA-1, at least for now, until someone patches and fixes the way that those certs are generated. Whereas the Metasploit cert is always SHA-256. And then the snake oil cert, the CN, is hostname.domain, using uppercase characters if there's an uppercase character in your hostname or your domain. Whereas the Metasploit always uses random alpha lowercase between 2 to 10 characters. So we can actually detect on that, and here's the bro script for doing it. Basically, all I'm saying is if the cert is not originating from inside my network, if it has a subject and issuer, if the subject and issuer are the same, and if the subject is not on my false positive list, and this way you can tune out, simple things like localhost, the obvious ones. And deploying this, really had like 10 false positives, and after that they kind of went away. And then, so what I'm saying is I'm just looking for CN, the SSL subject, the cert subject, is CN equals, and then lowercase characters between 2 to 10, and then that's it, and the cert subject ends. And the cert cipher is SHA-256. So after filtering out about, like I said, 10 false positives, this is really firing a false positive about once every 2 weeks, and that's pretty good. And again, whenever I run a Metasploit over SSL, it detects it every single time. So that was the Metasploit. So let's move on to something a little bit more complicated, something a little bit harder. Reverse SSH shells. And I got to give credit to W on this one. It was his epiphany that made it happen. So reverse SSH shells, you might see a lot of people talking about them, or maybe you've had pen tests done in your company. They're pretty popular because it's SSH, right? So how does that work? So an exploit script runs on a host inside of your network, and what it's going to run is something like this. So run this SSH command. So it's just binding a port and then SSHing out to, let's say, Amazon AWS. And then on your Amazon C2 server, let's say you're using Amazon for C2 because it's great, you would just SSH to that port that was bound. And then what you're doing, what you now have, is you're sitting at a full console inside your target network. And all the communication is over SSH. And it's encrypted. And it's just going to Amazon, which probably looks pretty normal, especially if you have a lot of developers in your company. So AWS IPs, that's not a good indicator for this. Reverse SSH, the fact that there's reverse SSH communication, that's a good indicator to share if you were to share, some indicators with your secret scroll groups. So let's detect that reverse SSH communication. How are we going to do that? So with every key press and SSH, a packet is sent and received. So for interactive reverse SSH, or for interactive SSHing, let's say you want to do PWD, right? So client sends the server the letter P, and then the server responds, "Hey, I got that P," and then this is when the letter P pops up on your terminal. That's how you know your terminal's not hung, right? You type some characters, and if they don't show up, then you've lost your terminal, right? And then it continues PWD, client to server, back and forth. So for each character that you press, that character is padded, and the SSH client in Linux pads it to 48 bytes, and Mac pads it to 42 bytes. So you press, P, it sends out 48 bytes, client to server, and then the server responds, "I got the P," that's another 48 bytes, back and forth. So on reverse SSH, it's 96 bytes. It's double padded. You have an SSH session over an SSH session. So it's the same thing. It's just double padded. So instead of 48 bytes, it's now 96 bytes. And instead of going from client to server, it's the flow is from server to client, because remember, you're typing on your evil Amazon C2 server. So 96 bytes, cool. That's a good detection mechanism. Let's just look for that all the time. But 96 byte packets and SSH sessions happen all the time. So the only way that we could do this to detect this interactive reverse SSH shell. All right, it's really hard. What was I talking about, bro? Right. So we need to look at each packet individually, one after the other. So you're typing at your command console, right? So it's 96 byte packets going back and forth because the reverse SSH shell. So you need to look at the first packet is 96 bytes. Then the very next packet also has to be 96 bytes. And then you have that at least 3 times over and else quit. That was my first attempt at writing a detection for this. So that doesn't work at all. Forward SSH shells look like that all the time, and that would be if you were to SSH into something and then SSH from that host into something else, and then type like that. That forward SSH shell would have those 96 byte packets going back and forth all the time. So instead, I decided to go, all right. So it's a reverse SSH shell. So the threat actor is on the server side, and he's typing from the server side to the client. So let's look at from server to client 96 bytes, then from client to server 96 bytes. Have that happen 3 times over, and then and if something doesn't match it, then quit. So way too many false positives. That didn't work at all. So here's the key to making this work for detecting interactive reverse SSH shells. You look for from server to client 96 bytes, so it's initiating the typing. Then from client to server 96 bytes, it's responding. Seeing that 3 times over, and if there's anything else in between there, like let's say a 112 byte packet, then it quits and starts the logic over again. And then at the end, you want to see from client to server larger than 96 bytes. Then you will alert. And what that is if you're typing into, you're doing your reverse SSH shell and you're typing into it from the server side, and then you hit enter at the end, that output is going to be larger than 96 bytes. So you're detecting on the return. Here's an example of that from server to client. So let's say PWD, and then from the server side you hit enter, and then the client side sends out the details, var, www, path, whatever it is, and that is going to be larger than 96 bytes. This works excellently. Very few false positives. I'm talking, again, maybe once every other week. A lot of true positives, but honestly, in about a 40,000 in-node environment, what you find a lot more of, rather than actual threat actors, is employees trying to bypass security mechanisms. And you guys are probably all thinking, like, I do that to get past our firewall. Yeah, so this is how you can detect that. Some lessons learned with this. Snort-based network intrusion detection systems, they don't have that granular next packet analysis. You can't tell Snort, I want to look for this, and then the very next packet has to look like this. Snort doesn't have a way to do that, but Bro does. And the scripting language that Bro has really gives you that power. And because there's multiple variations of SSH clients, where Mac is like 42-byte pads and Linux is 48-byte pads, I had to write multiple scripts for this, but it really wasn't that many. 4 to 6 scripts is pretty much all you need, depending on what you're running in your environment. And the script literally looks like this. The beginning of it is just looking for an SSH session, and then we're looking for the traffic back and forth individually, and we're just kind of counting. And again, you probably can't see it, but I'm releasing the script so you can just take a look at it in your own time. All right, so to conclude, the point of this talk was not to burn detection logic, which I totally just did. Someone in here probably works at Rapid7, and Metasploit has already been updated, so don't expect the script to work, after, in 10 minutes. But the point of the talk was to show you what's possible with Bro, and hopefully change your perspective on what can be detected and how. If you can see the evil in packet data, then you can write a Bro script to detect it. That's the whole point of this, really, the takeaway. So I want to give some shout-outs to these guys. Without them, I wouldn't know how anything works. And that's it. The Bro scripts are available there.